So our first high-level panel looks at two major issues, taking stock in Europe, where are we right now with gender equality, and then really digging deep into gender-based violence. Why have the figures gone up? What do we do to bring those figures down? So let me invite onto stage our two opening participants and speakers, Robert Biedron, MEP. Hello, Robert. Welcome. Take a seat next to me. And Corinne Detmeier. Thank you, Corinne. "20 seconds more applause helps Corinne go from there to here. So much easier to walk across the stage when there's applause. Thank you so much. It's great to have both of you. Corinne, first of all, the Gender Equality Index. First thoughts, reactions?
Well, data are extremely important. What gets measured gets done. So that's why we need those data. And they also tell us very important things. And if I look at the domain of power, for instance, I see one thing, but I'm also thinking of another thing. Because what we need is substantial power, not formal power. And if we look, for instance, that we see that only a third of participants in international fora debating critical issues, including threats of nuclear weapons, increasing military expenditures, and the weaponization of new technologies, are women. Only a third. So that's where the real power is. So that's something that we really have to look at. And CEDAW has just issued its 40th general recommendation. We're not really satisfied anymore with the equality, because equality, we're satisfied at 33%. We need parity, which means 50%. And that is, I would encourage all of you to read the General Recommendation 40, because it gives an excellent roadmap how to get there, how to get to parity. And when I look at the index and I see the decline, decrease in the parliamentary representation. Well, about a year and a half ago, there was an article in a newspaper in the Netherlands on interviewing female parliamentarians and even a cabinet minister. And they were all harassed as female politicians, and I think every female politician will recognize the misogyny that they are faced with. And the general idea was that there was not much they could do about this. But at exactly the same time, at a CEDAW session, I was quizzing the Norwegian delegation on what their measures are to protect female parliamentarians and to create an atmosphere where they are safe, because it is a duty of the government, when they have ratified the CEDAW Convention, to see to it. So it's not something, well, there's nothing to be done about it. No, go to your government. It's their job to see to it that not just you are elected as a parliamentarian, but that you are able to function as a parliamentarian to your full potential.
Robert, what resonated from what you've seen of the Gender Equality Index with you and the work that you've been doing?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that I answered Karin's call for volunteering to be here. Because I truly believe we need boys and men on the board to solve this issue, and this index is showing it clearly, that we need participation of whole society to embrace the issues, the problems we have. And we really have the serious problems, because the disparities are clear, and we see them among different member states. And what is, for me, especially as a politician, stunning, that after so many years of existing of European Union, we have managed to standardize so many issues. We have one standard of license plates. We have one standard of telecommunication. We have one standard of banana and carrots. But we still we still don't have one standard on women's rights.
No.
And this really strikes me so much, that it's 2024, and we are still discussing these issues. We are still fighting for the things which should be so obvious for us. Like, why? And I don't understand that. So this index is like, for politicians, it should speak to our soul and mind and heart that we really went wrong way. And I feel we are in troubles, because what we see, and Corina has mentioned that, we live in the multi-crisis world now. And the tendency, unfortunately, is not the tendency which we would like to see in the decision-making processes. The focus is on defense, security, more weapons, more investing in army, more buying these espionage programs, and so on, and shrinking space for discussing gender equality. And it's clear in so many member states. It was clear also for me, and Lina must have experienced it even stronger as a current chair of the FAM committee, that we see also shrinking space for institutionalization of gender equality. It's not a coincidence. And I'm not here to really criticize, because we choose really good commissioner for equality, but it's not a coincidence that this commissioner has multitask agenda and not only equality agenda. It's not a coincidence that in the portfolio spread around the new designated commissioners at this point, there was no gender mainstreaming mentioned. It's not a coincidence. Then we are fighting for so many years for the gender equality composition in the European Council. If there is someone from European Council in this room, you know very well, you have compositions on so many issues: transportation, aviation, militarization, security, youth, whatever you can imagine, except one, gender equality. Nothing on that. And unfortunately, with this term of the European Parliament, Council, and Commission, I see very little space for improvement.
Corinne, let me quote back Varesh from a few moments ago. He said, "So much is so bad." We've asked you to take stock of what's happening in Europe now and beyond. What would you point to? What concerns you? And what also gives you joy? What also
gives you joy?
Gives you joy. I know you weren't expecting joy in this conversation, but I'm putting it in there too.
Okay.
Good question.
Well, I've been a juvenile judge for a long time, and people ask me, how can you do that? Because there's so much that's not going well. And I always would say there are small steps that are going well, and that gives me the courage, or also the will to really work at that, in that field. And I think the same goes with women. But women's rights. But I must say, it's also kind of hard, because I agree with Robert. Why is there not one commissioner for women's rights? We don't have a minister in the Netherlands for women's rights. It's just somewhere at some ministry. Some countries do have it, and I think that is very good. I was asked also to give some global perspective, from the CEDAW point of view on the outcomes of the index. And it was kind of like, aren't we doing a better job as EU than other countries? It wasn't said outright, but it was kind of implied. And how does CEDAW look at those countries that are lagging behind or at the forefront? Well, basically, we look at, we treat all state parties the same. We only treat Sweden a little bit more harshly, because, of course, if they are at the top, then they have these higher standards, but that goes for all the Nordics. But basically, the issues that are brought forward always are a right to safe abortion, no child marriage, no female genital mutilation, no gender-based violence, no femicide. And we heard earlier that we are in a crisis of gender-based violence, and specifically from those that we know that, that are family. I'm not denying that we're in that crisis, but when you say that, it's as if it's a new problem, and it isn't. It's just a problem that we're now seeing. We've had gender-based violence within the families. I mean, rape within marriage was not a criminal offense. And governments would say, I'm old enough to remember that. What happens behind the front door is not the government's responsibility, but it is. And now we see that behind that front door, we need women and children, and men too, of course, to be safe. And that is the government's, it's their job to see to that. So it gives me joy that we see that. If I look at that, it gives me joy that when we had a femicide in the Netherlands 2 years ago, it would be said, oh, we don't understand, such a nice young man, so polite, and what happened here? He just murdered his wife and 3 children? Nobody would have expected that. The word femicide would not be seen anywhere. Now we see in chocolate letters, as we say in the Netherlands, we see the words femicide. And I think that that is changing all over. That doesn't, we still have to do a lot about it because it's huge. And we cannot, as we've done several years ago, say, oh, maybe these are people who are new to our country. No, it happens everywhere. In every age, in every social background, every race, there's no, you can't pinpoint a specific group. So that's really something that governments have to fight.
Robert, before I go to you, I'm going to give a little stealth message to the audio team. I would like microphones in the room right now, because in 5 minutes, I feel the thoughts and the questions coming from the forum audience. I'm not going to make you have to wait any longer, but I do need those microphones in place. So whoever's mic wrangling, please bring the microphones now, and then in 5 minutes' time, when Robert's finished speaking, we can then go to your questions, your thoughts for Robert and Corinne before we move on with the rest of this session. Robert, sorry to interrupt your thought process. Go ahead.
Well, I fully agree with Corina with the progress we have made, because if we would not be here 100 years ago, no, probably we wouldn't be here. But I'm fed up with the slow progress we are making on issues. I get estimates that we need 60 years to reach full gender equality in European Union. 60 years, imagine. In 60 years, probably most of us, you're very young, but most of us won't be alive. In 60 years, most of the professions we do now won't exist. In 60 years, there will be probably, because of the climate catastrophe, palms growing in Brussels, and finally the sun will shine in Brussels. 60 years, unimaginable, to have sun in Brussels. This will happen. We need 300 years. In this space, if we do it this way, 300 years to achieve it globally. I can't wait, because it's about real lives. It's about real girls, real women, my mother, my sister, my friends, my female colleagues, my female advisor who is today with me here. It's about us. And I don't want to wait for that. And what is good, and I'm so happy with that there are so many women who know that they have rights and they do not hesitate to use these rights. And I think this should be also, we should be in solidarity with all of these movements. I come from Poland. I come from Poland, where we still have one of the most barbaric registration on abortion. This legislation introduced by the former government has killed, really killed, women. I come from Poland, where we had the real pregnancy registration. It rings the bell. It's like from the Handmaid's Tale. We had the register where all pregnancies were registered, and police or the national prosecutor could step in and find out why women terminated her pregnancy. And I know, and I really believe in that, when we are in solidarity, when we look for synergies, when we do it in a smart way, we really win. And I know also, because I know so many brave women, that women are unstoppable. And this is a great thing. And this is what all of these sexist, misogynies, all these terrible men and some women are the most afraid, that you are unstoppable. Thanks God.
Robert, shamelessly playing to the audience. Let me see where your questions, your thoughts are. Please stand up. Okay, I see that hand. Can you stand up and a microphone will come right to you? Put your hand up, a microphone will fly into your hand. Fantastic. Please say who you are.
Hello everyone, I'm Anna Kuprava from Georgia. I'm a Young European Ambassador representing EU Neighbors East project, and it's a pleasure to be here with all these wonderful people. Thank you so much for your wonderful speeches and aspirations. And my question is about the legislation on gender violence or violence against the women on domestic and European level. As you already addressed, there's a lot of directives, hard law on EU level, which is awesome, and it's regulating all different aspects. But what are the main issues which you could not really coordinate together to create this kind of directive, or didn't really work out that well, and how it's changing now? Because I think there's also one of the workshops later about that. But still, I would love to hear about your opinion as someone who is already working in European Parliament. And thank you so much.
Good question. Thank you.
Would you like to answer?
Yeah. No, you can answer. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah. I think we made a lot of progress, by the way. The last legislation was really very fruitful. I'm sure Simone Weil, who established FAM Committee, I think in 1979, if she is somewhere, she must be very proud of Lina continuing this work and so on. We made progress on ratification and entering into Istanbul Convention, which Georgia, I don't know, are you a part of? You are.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I keep fingers crossed for Georgia, by the way, on many other issues. So we entered the Istanbul Convention. We have a good, Lina has mentioned, directive on gender-based violence. But of course, there is still much work to do. I think the committee in European Parliament, which has delivered so much together with European Commission, the Council, with the help with EIGE, I must always mention, and civil society organizations. I think what now is important is the implementation. Implementation in member states. This is very important because we have already the tools, but we still do not have it in practice. We don't see it working yet in all the member states to have the same standard everywhere. And I think this is the greatest challenge. And so I think the Lina's Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality should be renamed for Women's Rights, Gender Equality and Implementation Committee.
Ooh, no pressure.
Yeah, well, there is so much to implement now. They will deliver because they are great on that. and of course, and Lina again mentioned that, the lack of the definition on consent. This is the issue which we were fighting for. Unfortunately, to the blockage of the council, we didn't succeed, but I think this is one of the issues where we have much to do. And last but not least, very shortly, I think we live really in the difficult times where we need all these tools. Again, I come from Poland, and as a politician, I witnessed the situation where a girl raped by Russian soldiers from Ukraine came to Poland, and she asked for termination of her pregnancy. And that could not be done, because to terminate her pregnancy, she had to add the proof from the police or the prosecutor, and she didn't have, and she was refused. I don't want to have it anymore, this situation, so that's why it's so important that we will apply a good legislation as soon as possible.
Corinne, briefly, you had
Yes.
something more to add, and then we've got another question.
Okay, I think it is a story like that gets to the heart. But it also got to the heart of CEDAW, the UN Human Rights Committee, because we did an inquiry into Poland specifically on the abortion situation there and the bad situation there. Of course, with the cooperation of the Polish government, but still, we came up with recommendations and quite harsh findings. And I think that where the EU could get a step forward is helping CEDAW to get more visible, because with CEDAW, you have tools like you can have your individual violations. You can go as an individual to the committee to have the committee look at those violations, but also as a group. When you say in our country, like Poland, NGOs can come forward and say, the situation on abortion in our country is just too bad. Please, CEDAW, come and do an inquiry. And a lot of countries could, or NGOs, could benefit from that. And I think the EU has a role to play in helping to get the visibility there. We have been in office more than 40 years, and yet the visibility is, I'm sorry to say, not good enough. Yeah. The visibility of the Children's Rights Convention is much more visible. Why is that? Well, children are nice. You can, sort of, women, no, forget it. But this is one of the problems that we face. Women, isn't it enough? Aren't you there yet? Do you still need more? And that is something that holds us back and gives us this backlash. So that's my answer.
Good morning. You're already standing. Yes. Put your hand up. The mic will come to it.
Hello. My name is Penelope. I am a German student currently studying my human rights law master in France. And I think the conversation around consent is super, super important. But I would also like to ask a question about the other side of the coin, let's say. For those of you who can't see me right now, I use a wheelchair because of a birth defect that I entailed. And I would like to just ask a question regarding EU legislation and the lack of it surrounding the forced sterilization of people, especially women with disabilities. Because a recent New York Times study found that even though many member states of the EU have, of course, ratified the Istanbul Convention, which outlaws forced sterilization, a third of EU member states still make exceptions for those with disabilities who they deem too disabled to consent. So I would like to ask how the EU plans to integrate disabled people, especially disabled people with uteruses, into their definition of consent, and how we can stop forced sterilization.
I can start. I can't really say anything about the EU, so that part of your question I can't answer, but I can say something about CEDAW, because just in October, we gave a decision on forced sterilization of indigenous women in Peru, and this has been a landmark decision of CEDAW, and it also shows what CEDAW can do. And so this is what I would like to, again, tell you on what on a global level would be possible. And of course, the EU is part of this global playing field. And then I think Robert is more apt to answer the rest of your question.
Well, this is a very good question. Picturing, unfortunately, greater phenomenon of where EU can step in and where EU cannot step in. And the member states, and always sometimes Commission or the Council, rarely Parliament, because Parliament is much more progressive on that, is using this excuse that this is not a competence of EU, because the health is still a competence of the member states. And they are using this excuse not to integrate into these issues, and the forced sterilization, which is a barbaric practice, in my opinion, and I hope you all agree with that, is one of these issues. I completely disagree with this approach. I completely disagree that EU is not to deliver on health issues. Why? Because we have examples on that. EU already has break the treaties on that during the pandemic. COVID-19 showed us clearly that when EU wants to overuse the power, it finds the ways. So why the Council and the Commission is not trying to find a way how to save real lives? Because we are not only talking about forced sterilization, it's also an issue of sexual and reproductive health and rights, including abortion. This is also where we often hear, well, the commissioner will come here, she's a great commissioner, but she also during the hearing said, well, this is not my competence. This is up to the member states. But we should keep pushing and asking, so why you are stepping in other fields where you have no competences, and on these, where that's of course shaky and politically fragile, and maybe this is not the ground where you all would like to deal with, why you are not entering there, where it's about real lives of women and girls, and very often also boys and men concerning sexual and reproductive health and rights. Why you're not stepping there? And this is the question I leave you for the Council and the Commission.
Corinne, Robert, thank you so much for helping us take stock of gender equality in Europe right now and then looking beyond 2025. We really appreciate you being on the stage. I will walk you to the steps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Just before Guy moves on with the next section, I'm going to ask Adriana Costapoulou to come onto stage. Thank you. Come this way. Thank you very much. And also Anna Collins-Falk. And if you just sit here and here, you'll be ready for the next section. Thank you, Anna. Please sit here. Wonderful. Thank you. Guy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Femi, and also to our fantastic panelists. What we want to do is for each panel is to make sure that we have the IGA perspective from the researchers who worked to produce that data. And joining us already on the stage, are you going to walk to the applause? You missed that. Already on the stage, we have our IGA colleague, Christina Fabre, who is the team leader for combating gender-based violence and contributed a lot to the research that we've all seen and heard about. So my first question to you is, this research was huge. It was a combination of efforts from Eurostat, from the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, and the European Institute for Gender Equality. There were responses from over 115,000 people, and lots of people aren't happy with the 1 in 3 statistics specifically and many other things, and they might look at that data and say Europe is not making progress. So my first question is, what would you say to these people?
Well, if we talk about prevalence rates, then it's true that. Here?
Can we get her mic turned on?
Can you hear me? No. Hello?
Yeah, we've got the hand. We can use the hand mic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yes. So if we talk about prevalence rates, yes, for sure that we have not made any progress, so that the prevalence rates are similar that there were 10 years ago. And still, like as you say, 1 in 3 women in the EU experience violence, 1 in 5 experience intimate partner violence, 1 in 3 experience sexual violence or harassment at the workplace, and 3.8 women. 3.8 women now?
Yeah,
Okay. Then 3.8 women that has disclosed being victims of rape in the European Union, which means like 14 million of females. So that, then I know that we cannot talk a lot about data, but let me give you like 2 more points. Like if we check the European Barometer,
I think maybe just face that way a bit more. It seems to be saying.
Yeah,
See if that makes a
because
difference. Sorry.
yeah, no. That if we look at the data from the Eurobarometer that was published last November, we see that apologize for this. Then we see that it makes weird. So that 72% of the respondents just disagree with the statement that says that women often make up or exaggerate claims of abuse or rape. And also 72% totally disagree, and 15 tend to disagree with the statement that says that domestic violence is a private matter and should be handled within the family. So this means that almost 1 in 3 people still in the European Union thinks that women fabricate or exaggerate claims of sexual violence, and that 2 in 10 still thinks that domestic violence is a private issue that should remain hidden or unspoken. So we have made quite a lot of progress, I would say, in these 10 years, but not when we are talking about the social and cultural norms. So there are still persisting cultural and social challenges that we need to tackle, and there are a lot of cultural norms across some member states.
We didn't think it was going to be like this.
Sorry, is it possible to make sure that the audio team, we're just hearing from our mics and nothing else?
But it is not new, at least not for us. We read the paper, a survey, a stat. This is the same data, the same story we expect. And we wonder, it shouldn't be like this. History, it's said, happens in waves, inherent in the movement of a planet, inherent in the tide that breaks on shore. Water might be fluid, but persistent, and where the waves retreat, they leave a trace. Movement leaves the landscape changed. We talked of gaps, of cracks, of holes and inconsistencies. Through gaps, we fall, we disappear. But spaces, rightly said, can be protective. In spaces, we don't have to scream so loudly to be heard.
Grateful, and I'm sorry, and hopefully...
Golden grit, pluck tenacity.
I'm not sure if it was pre-recorded or someone was just practicing live and we were hearing it. Maybe we'll find out later. I'm so sorry, Christina. Continue.
No worries. So I was saying that from the gender equality perspective, we need to tackle all these cultural and social norms. We need to tackle systemic and structural challenges and inequalities, but we also need to acknowledge that we have achieved like 2 main milestones. That is the ratification of the Istanbul Convention and also the adoption of the EU directive. And it's very important that the EU directive also criminalize like some forms of cyber violence, and mainly if we don't want to see these prevalence rates still increasing. And I was also delighted to listen to the president of the FEM committee that saying that we need to strengthen our legal frameworks in the sense that we need also to move from these kind of outdated notions of force and intention towards consent-based, so that we need to ensure that the individual's agency and also we need to ensure the individual's rights
in deciding about their bodies, their identities, and their images. And I'm talking not only about the rape consent-based definition of rape, but also deep fakes, for instance. So cyber violence is posing a lot of risk at the women, and we need also to strengthen the legal frameworks and the enforcement of these legal frameworks.
Absolutely. We have a panel on cyber violence later today. So one of the things that strikes me is that the problem is incredibly multifaceted, and a big problem is getting people to agree that there is a problem. And then once we've overcome that hurdle, it's how do we actually implement it? And that brings me on to a question about metrics. And what's the most valuable metric that you think that member state countries should be looking at? For example, should they be looking at the number of incidents of violence reported to the police?
It has been said this morning that data is very important, and we say that the better data, better policy. So that I think that member states should look at different data sources. So for sure, administrative data, but also always in combination with dedicated population-based surveys, and also with qualitative research on social and cultural and the roots of violence. We have seen that in the survey as well, that most of the women don't report the violence to the police. It's only 13.7 female that reported the experience of violence. So that the police data shows us only a portion of the total extent of violence against women. But I do think that we need to use that police data. And I do think that we need police data also because violence against women, it's a fundamental rights violation. And what does it mean? This means that member states had to be accountable of addressing violence against women. And to be accountable, we need administrative data. We need to be able to monitor the institutional response, and we need to be able to monitor the outcomes for victims and perpetrators. And only with police data we can measure this. Let me just give you an example that EIGE is collecting administrative data from the police and justice sector on different forms of violence. And by the way, next month we are going to publish country profiles with this new administrative data. And if we check only one indicator, that it's femicide, or the narrow definition of intentional killing of women by their intimate partners or family members, we see that almost 800 women were killed in 2022, and which means more than 2 per day. But this data comes only from 17 member states. There are still 10 member states at the European Union that cannot disaggregate the data by sex of the victim and the perpetrator, and by relationship of a victim and perpetrator. And if we don't have comprehensive data, we don't know the phenomenon that we want to tackle. So very rarely we will have effective policies if we don't understand, we don't know the problem. But we won't be able to monitor the implementation of the policies, and for sure we won't be able to monitor the effectiveness of these strategies. So that I think that, as I said, compilation or combination of different data sources, but for sure to hold member states accountable, we need police data.
From my perspective, listening to this, it's hard to know what to be most outraged about, whether it's the results we have, the results we can't get hold of, or people's response to them sometimes. It's incredibly complicated, and it gives us a very fascinating insight into the work that you do. If you can, very, very, very quickly for the last question, because I get told off afterwards. What else do you think, what's the most important thing that you think the survey tells us that you want member states to listen to and take away?
For me, one of the main disappointments of the survey is that still only 13.4 females reach out to the police, but that there are 64 women that disclose violence only to the close persons, so family members or friends. So this means that women still cope with the consequences of violence on their own. And we do know that the specialized support services are key if we want female women to leave the violent situation. And we saw from the survey as well that only 6.4% of women reach out to a specialized support service. So this means that if we expect women on their own to leave the situation of violence, it rarely will happen. So we need to strengthen the specialized support services, and we need also to remove the barriers that women still face in accessing justice and in accessing support services. And we have seen across the countries that there are different reasons why women does not still reach to the specialized support services. And it can be like cultural factors that in some countries barely these specialized support services exist, that some are moving towards gender-neutral approaches, so meaning that they are losing focus on the specific needs of women victims of violence. There are understaffed, there are underfunded, but we need also that to look into the cultural factors and how to remove shame and blame on victims, how to make safe spaces and safe reporting. So that I'm just, yeah, I just want I'm eager to learn from the panelists about the specific measures and specific strategies that they are aware of, and just to learn about their expertise and their knowledge.
Thank you so much. If you don't know Christina, that was the fastest she's ever answered a question. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Well done. I just quickly say that it's so important that this work is happening, and a huge thank you to you for leading that project and also to all of the team for IGA. I'm now going to hand back to Femi.
Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would like one more live microphone to come to the stage so that we have two, because we lost the microphone while Christina was battling with the audio technicians. See if we could get some audio. So I would like one more microphone. Thank you. Perfect. Excellent. All right, so in this part of our high-level panel, we are going to be looking at tackling gender-based violence in the EU. Anna, Adriana, it's so good to have you on stage. Thank you for waiting and listening through Christina's presentation. Anna, can you explain where you're from, and Adriana as well, so they understand, so that the forum understands the perspective that you're bringing to this part of our panel?
Thank you.
Keep talking.
Okay, is this on?
Keep talking a little bit more.
Hello, hello.
All right, Adriana, hand your microphone over to Anna. And I will hand this one to the dustbin.
Okay, I think this is working.
Great.
I'm honored to be here. I'm Anna Collins-Falk from the Swedish Gender Equality Agency, the government agency charged with tackling, both monitoring, analyzing, and supporting the implementation of Sweden's gender equality policy, including the national strategy on prevention and combating men's violence against women. So I think, if I'm to be really honest, I presume I'm here as a member state, both leading the Gender Equality Index, but also somehow leading in the gender-based violence survey, which is not quite as honorable. But I will explain why.
Hello from my side as well. So I'm representing GREVIO, which is the monitoring body established by the Istanbul Convention. And since we have youth participants also, to explain that the Istanbul Convention is the Council of Europe Convention on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. It's the most far-reaching instrument in this field. And I can also acknowledge the presence of two other members of GREVIO. Can I see you, dear Pile and Pascal? Yes. We have a great team. So I'm here as a monitoring body, and I can also start by saying that I have a confession to make. I feel very pleased, glad to be here, and thank you very much, Sheila and Eige, for this invitation. It's a great opportunity. It's a pivotal time for us to discuss this very important issue and to see how we can empower women, empower young women, how we can hold accountable the perpetrators. But at the same time, I have a feeling of great responsibility. And perhaps you do as well. A responsibility because, Anna and Femi, what are we discussing right now? It's reason number one why women are held back in their personal achievements, in their professional life, in their educational attainments, and so on. So it is very, very alarming.
Adriana, when you look at tackling global based violence in the EU, you talk about a holistic approach. Can you unpack that for us, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me start by saying and reiterating Carlene's words that data is awful, data is shocking. 1 in 3 still, and why? What is wrong? What's happening? We do need a holistic approach. We cannot live only with isolated measures in one sector or another. The Istanbul Convention, what it offers is this exactly comprehensive holistic approach, which is based in 4 pillars: prevention, protection, prosecution, and integrated policies. So what we say is that in Grevio, we are the navigation tool for states. We offer tailor-made guidance for states to see where they lag behind, what they can improve, which are their strengths, what can be done better. First of all, we need, alongside this comprehensive approach, political will, but not any political will which is driven by true desire to bring meaningful change. So this is extremely important. We need also the resources. We need time and the guidance, which is very, very precious.
Could I pick up on some of that? I think we've had the president of the CEDAW committee, and now we have Council of Europe, Diana here. And I think that's been really helpful for Sweden as a member state to be held to account that we have a gold standard in the Istanbul Convention, which has informed our 10-year national strategy on combating and preventing men's violence against women, and also the definitions. But this we have put in the context of work that should be, or that is gender transformative. We're looking at power relations. So for us in Sweden, our work on gender-based violence is very much part of our work on promoting gender equality and women's rights. And it's one of our 6 sub-goals, just as very similar to the ones of the domains that you have seen in IGE. So I think that really speaks to, it is a holistic approach from prevention all the way to prosecution, but it's also very much an integral part. So we can now say that, yes, we've made a lot of progress, but that's based on a lot of the legislation. We heard earlier mention of consent-based sexual offense legislation, rape. We've had a lot of big reforms that took place in the 70s and 80s and 90s that really give us a strong foundation to continue our work. 60 years ago, we had the law on rape in marriage, and that has really changed attitudes. We have laws when it comes to women's integrity, kind of women's safety. And we have a lot of other legislation that we can rely on. But apart from that, laws that empower women, women's economic empowerment, we sometimes talk about economic violence, but we need to talk about women's economic empowerment. To have the power to leave a destructive or violent relationship is really, really important. So to have individual taxation, that's a law we brought in. To have women participate in the labor force, make your own money, and to be able to keep that money. We have subsidized quality childcare and elderly care. I think that's probably, or we see that that's probably one of the most important drivers for gender equality, and especially for economic empowerment and labor force participation, obviously. So these all interact when we're trying to both protect and support victims and survivors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. What you're saying is very, very important. If I can bring a very brief overview of some key findings that we have reached in Grevio at a European level. So we see a mixed picture, let's say, with progress in some areas, but also areas where states really lag behind. Areas where we have identified progress are national policies. We see more and more states really taking measures to adopt comprehensive national action plans which are based on the definitions, objectives of the Istanbul Convention, which is very positive. Also, we have seen better measures in terms of supporting victims' specialized support services, both quality of services, but also number of services, including shelters, are increasing progressively. At the same time, we see legislative reforms. It has been addressed several times today. Yes, law change, that's extremely important, but it is the starting point. Even the best piece of legislation is not enough. We need efficient implementation. And I would like to bring a keyword here, which is training. We haven't discussed this yet. Training of professionals who will be asked to implement efficiently this legislation. And this is an area where Grevio really has find a lot of gaps which need to be turned into spaces, if I can use the word of our youth participants. So we need to invest a lot into training, and I think to change the mentalities, of course, of all professionals who, in one way or another, will come in contact with women victims.
I think you put the finger on one of our biggest challenges, because we've identified this as well, capacity development and training. Some of the examples of work in progress, we included in tertiary education in the curricula of a number, I think it's 8 or 9 educations, also violence against women and understanding of that. It's also a way of supporting detection, early detection of violence against women. But importantly, moving beyond the capacity, we have a lot of support, guidance material. I think one of the important guidance materials we have, and I like the title of it, it says, "This can't wait." And it's method support, it's guidance, it's for professionals, because not everyone is an expert in this field, and where do you turn? And that's being developed even further on how to use that. It's also available on our website, but this really can't wait. But again, beyond capacity development of professionals, both government authorities, but especially civil society, and not the least, schools are very important, because we're touching now on social norms and attitudes to gender equality and to gender-based violence and relationships. It touches on what we're doing in comprehensive sexuality education. We've changed that. It's now about sex and relationships, and it's about very much how do you relate to each other. So in schools, at a very early stage, children are taught this. They're also brought to, how do you call this, youth centers and so on. I just wanted to mention, because it's a generational thing, whereas my mother's age, when my mother just passed away, so I'm a little bit sensitive about that, but you know, she got married before rape in marriage was illegal. I went to university when we got other legislation. My daughter was old enough that she didn't, consent-based legislation in 2018 didn't exist, but my son did. And he came home one day from school with a bag of condoms. And I said, "Oops," you know, it was a bit early, I thought. You know, I didn't see him in a relationship. And I said,
how old?
Oh, I think it was 15. And then, well, 14 actually, 14. And it says, oh no, this is the second time they brought us there. And he was like, ah. I said, well, that's good, you know. I was like, yeah, and what else did they tell you? Yeah, we're told about consent-based, but he didn't say the word consent-based. And I said, I was trying to get to, what are you going to say now? And he said, oh, yeah, and if you have sex with somebody, you're meant to ask them, is this okay with you? Okay with you? Okay with you? At every stage. Otherwise, it's a crime. Mommy, it's a crime. It's criminal.
What was your face, Anna, doing as your
just,
dear 14-year-old was telling you this?
Yeah, so it's like, good, just very good, you know, respect and so on. But again, knowing this, that it's an attitude, and I think that's also part of what we sometimes say is the Nordic paradox. Yes, alarming and terrible situation when it comes to gender-based violence, but we're the same situation with many other European member states. But we do have the advantage to build on now, that we do have a strong societal level, how do you say, acceptance that we have to combat gender-based violence. It is not acceptable, and it is a crime. So having that brought out, and when we bring legislation, such as the consent-based legislation, a government authority was actually financed and given a big assignment to spread that information to the general public as well. So information awareness is important. And I wanted to give you another practical example. We're targeting youth as well. One is called Jealousy is Not Romantic. Because when you're young, oh, he's jealous, this is so romantic, he really loves me, you know. Not good. So this is a recurring campaign, but it's also beyond a campaign with support material, with guidance and so forth, to really focusing on youth relationships so that you can have a healthy relationship and that you start thinking about what constitutes violence in a relationship. And I think we're you know, this is all work in progress. We're doing it every year, but things like that are important.
I'm going to bring in some questions and thoughts from Slido. So that's our virtual audience and also people in the room who would like to just submit their questions. So discussions on gender inequality seem to focus a lot on inequality of GBV against women. How do we include people from other marginalized groups, LGBTQI+ community, different ethnicities, people with disabilities in these discussions, and then have real policies?
Yes, very important question. The Istanbul Convention provides for this intersectional approach, which is extremely important in all measures that governments have to take at policy level. When we talk about comprehensive policy frameworks, this is exactly what we mean. Policy making, policy development, having into account the intersectional dimension. Because we have to have in mind that all legislative initiatives, policy making initiatives, have to be based on real life experiences. And this is exactly the example with rape. Let's be honest, legislator, and especially legislations that till now in some countries require the criminalization of the offense of rape based on the existence of threat or of force, they have been made by men in the majority in the legislative parliaments. But they are not based on lived experiences. There is not a right or a wrong reaction to rape. Many women will freeze. We don't have the dilemma between fight or flight. You may freeze. You may flop. You may even befriend the perpetrator. So the legislator should have this in mind. And of course, the intersectional dimension and dimension of all these women who are exposed increasingly in gender-based violence should be in mind of governments. But also, I would like to bring on board the fact that women that have this intersectional dimension and are also victims of discrimination more generally, they have increased barriers in accessing shelters, accessing services, accessing justice. So it is very important to have this holistic approach.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And we provide a lot of training, there is a lot of training provided in Sweden by various institutions and authorities, whether it's police, prosecutors, judges, and so forth. But to get back to your question regarding inclusion, we always have to have an intersectional perspective in our analysis, as well as in our data collection and so forth. By doing that, we've actually pinpointed recently some specific groups. One of the areas is, we've launched a report on that, is violence against elderly women, which actually has created quite some debate. It's been underreported and it's not been discussed that much. But we've also looked at, we have a focus on violence against women in an honor context as well, honor-based violence and oppression, which is quite challenging, and we're working on that both in awareness and in an approach to support that and provide services that reach out.
Anna, but both those cases still involve women who are very important, but the question was broader than that. It's like, GBV, you always talk about women, but there's a whole spectrum out there.
These involve women, but if you're working on honor-based violence, there are also men who are victims in that situation. But I think we also have a very clear focus that we work with men and boys, both as allies and to engage for gender equality and to prevent men's violence against women, and also very strong civil society organizations, which are absolutely crucial to work with. But then also looking at intersections, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's migrant women or people newly arrived in our country, we can really see the difference. And there I want to highlight the example that if you are a refugee and have recently come to Sweden, the awareness and understanding even of your rights and the social norms there is a big challenge, and to also overcome the challenges to seek the support if you're a victim or survivor of violence.
I have another question that's been submitted on Slido. This one is from Gorhan Demira, and Gorhan has a theory that we have to start with tackling problems regarding democracy, rule of law, and protection of fundamental rights to solve problems related to gender equality, particularly gender-based violence. Gorhan believes that that would be a much more effective and sustainable way of tackling GBV. Democracy, human rights first, then you're going to sort out GBV.
Absolutely. Yes. When we say gender-based violence is a human rights violation, this is exactly what we mean. It's a very good approach indeed. And as it was mentioned in the beginning this morning, addressing gender-based violence and combating gender-based violence, and combating gender-based violence is not a luxury, is not an option, is democracy. It's at the heart of democracy. So it's the same as with regard to consent. It's the foundation of democracy, consent. It's nothing more, nothing less. Why are we fearing consent so much? So it is indeed these democratic values and rule of law that are the foundation of all these efforts.
And I'm going to give you a different question, Because I saw
like
you
that
not.
question.
Yeah, you like that one. All right, go ahead on that one,
No,
briefly.
I just wanted to say that it's very much anything we do on gender equality and women's rights, gender-based violence is very much part of that. And for Sweden, we see that it's really the ultimate expression of inequality and human rights violation in the form of gender-based violence. I mean, what can be worse? I mean, yeah, femicide, for the example. So it very much informs what we do, and we also have a power analysis as part of that. So yes, human rights-based. I mean, we see the Sustainable Development Goals, I think even have a pin here on number 5, and how it's all interconnected.
This last question is from Aurora Lentz, and she's submitted this via Slido. And she's made note of what she's seen and heard so far. We share the same views, values, and goals. Nodding, 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 okay. How do we translate all of this content to actually make change happen? If we all agree, who are we changing minds, hearts and minds? Anna, just very briefly, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Now, well, I think we need to really focus on implementation, and we need to support the various institutions and those who drive change, whether it's the youth, civil society, and holding government and government authorities to account in doing this. So we need to learn from each other, like today. So moving ahead and not stopping in this way. But we've also seen that government has to take the leadership and actually give instructions for this to happen. Mm-hmm. That's a way of holding governments to account. But you also have to fund it. And to make sure you don't throw the funding at any interesting initiative. We have one example where we're funding, our agency is providing funding for prevention of gender-based violence. And it's available to civil society organizations, but also to local government municipalities. And it's one of the requirements is that it's research-based or evidence-based in that sense, so that they cooperate with research institutions or universities. Okay. You know, to know what really works and move on implementation. I love that word. Our previous panels was talking. Yeah. Implementation. I'm going to implement you handing the microphone to Adriana.
All right.
You don't have consent, not. That's an excellent question. Thank you very much. I think that we all agree in terms of the destination, the objective, but not necessarily on how to achieve this. So the 1 in 3 result of the gender-based violence survey for me represents, you know what, missed opportunities. Missed opportunities for hundreds and hundreds of women where there were no prevention, no protection for them. And I think we really need to invest on primary prevention with a large-scale, comprehensive efforts, and to tackle, to address the underlying causes, the root causes in society. This is extremely important.
Adriana, Anna, thank you so much. We appreciate you.